Well, welcome back to the evening session. This is a session entitled Church Reimagined. It will be a very different session to a normal keynote. We decided it was the evening. You may be tired, and you certainly didn't want to listen to me talk for a long period of time. Glad there was no comments then, Graham, from the front. So we thought we would do this session very, very differently. I am going to intro it for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then we're going to share some stories that will be on the screen. But what's clear to me is what I'm looking forward to over these 2 days is to hear the stories of the connection, the stories of what God's doing across the connection in varied ways. And I hope some of the stories that we'll look at will inspire you and challenge you. But I want to make sure that we find time over these 2 days to hear the other stories, the ones that are sat in this room. What's clear to me, and where I want to begin and what I want to suggest, is that we live, and you will be well aware of this, we live in a period of history where there's a seismic shift in culture. And many of us who are in ministry, whether ordained or lay, were trained to be leaders and pastors in a world which no longer exists. If I examine my training and what I was taught, the world I was taught to be a pastor, a leader, a minister in, actually from 20 years ago, no longer exists. We're conducting ministry in a cultural earthquake where the old world is gone, but not quite. And for many, the church has become the last enclave of the old. A place where people come for safety and security and familiarity in a changing world. And the statement that's hard to make, but I think is true, is that while those churches do provide a much desired and appreciated service for their ever-declining memberships, many are failing in their opportunity to continue the Great Commission of Christ into the world of 2016 and beyond. You can challenge me later, and that's okay. And I guess some of us, if we were being really honest around this room, and I probably put myself into that category, prefer the old world. There's lots of stuff I preferred about it. The music of it. I preferred it. I understand the worship stuff of the 80s. The kind of stuff that comes out from some of the very varied music genres across this world, whether it be Bethel or Jesus culture or Hillsong, just I don't get very often. It's not my field or what I enjoy. But we can't do ministry back then. We have to do ministry now in this context. Graham mentioned earlier on the book of Acts as the first fresh expression of church. I want to just pause in the book of Acts for my intro just for a minute or two and take us on a bit of a journey through Acts in about 3 minutes. So this is the Bible study bit of this evening. Okay, so we're getting the Bible out? Well, kind of. Remember Jesus says in Acts chapter 1 and verse 8 to go into Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And you know what happens immediately after Jesus says that? He says those words, and then some really cool stuff happens where Jesus ascends into heaven, a kind of one of those wow moments when Jesus just disappears in front of them. And what are the disciples then left doing? They're left sat looking into the sky. They're sat there looking and waiting and wondering until this angel appears, or 2 angels come down and start to talk to them and say, what are you doing? Basically, get on with the stuff that Jesus has asked you to do. I sometimes wonder whether as a church we spend more time just gazing than doing, but we can have a whole conversation around that. And as you read the rest of the book of Acts, it's their outworking of Acts 1 verse 8. Just bear with me for a minute. From Acts 2 to 7, the movement of Jesus is primarily centered in Jerusalem. They're obeying that first part of the command. And then in Acts chapter 7, Stephen is killed, and the persecution begins. When you read Acts chapter 8 and verse 1, it says this: on that day, after Stephen's been executed, on that day, a great persecution broke out against the church in Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. It's interesting that Acts 8:1, the disciples begin to obey Acts 1:8. It's true. It took a little heat. It took a little bit of persecution to get them moving, but they begin to move. I guess if everything had remained comfortable, they may well have stayed in Jerusalem, the safety of Jerusalem. But when things heat up and the persecution heats up, it stirs them and forces them to begin to do what Jesus has actually asked them to do. Because they've had the first 7 chapters in Jerusalem, and then it pushes them out into Judea and Samaria. In our Methodist context, we're beginning to talk more and more about change and growth and planting. It's become the language that we talk. It's on our agendas. And I guess it's born out of a sense of pain. And that pain motivates us to get busy joining Jesus in his mission. Because I guess if all was going hunky-dory, we'd have stayed in the comfort of Jerusalem. Because we prefer it. The old world, we prefer it if we're honest. But things are not comfortable, and things are painful, and that pain drives us into Judea, to Samaria, to those places that are not comfortable, and that we would normally walk around and avoid. That's Samaria, of course. We're forced to walk into and engage with Jesus' mission. Then in Acts 9, Saul's converted, and everything begins to change. In Acts 13, Saul and Barnabas are set apart for the ends of the earth missionary work. It kind of pushes out and beyond. And so we see the outworking of Acts 1, verse 8. By the time we get to Acts 17, they have to discover a new strategy. Because the old strategy now, in this changing world, doesn't work anymore. A fresh expression. Things have to change. Their mission was the same. Their mission was to make disciples of Jesus Christ. It was the mission, and it is the mission, but the strategy begins to shift in Acts chapter 17. Paul's custom up until this point was to begin with the synagogue. We see it at the first part of Acts 17. When he arrives at Thessalonica, he goes to the synagogue. And then in Berea, in Acts 17, he goes to the synagogue. He begins with the synagogue. Paul's kingdom expansion strategy up to that point was to go to the synagogue and engage in spiritual conversation. Then Paul gets to Athens, and there's a shift. Verses 16 and 17. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue, that's the old strategy, with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well, here's the strategy beginning to expand, as well as in the marketplace, day by day, with those who happen to be there. So we see a shift in Paul from the synagogue to the marketplace. The context of his mission demanded from him a very different and new strategy. I guess Paul would have been far more comfortable staying in the old world. But the mission forces him to rethink, to reimagine the missionary model. And it all changes. We do church and ministry in a changing world. That is the reality of the situation we face. And whether we like it or not, we cannot continue to live as though the world is 20, 30 years ago. We can't do that. and we need a changing strategy. And part of the aim of these 2 days is to reimagine what that looks like, to find and to hear some of those strategies. So when our planning team got together, we wanted to profile some stories of churches that were looking and identifying new strategy. Different context, what does that mean for us? How do we do church in that context? And we couldn't bring them all here. And if we put them all on the platform, they'd take too long, we thought, because they'd want to tell all of their story. So we've limited them to 4 or 5 minutes, and it's easier to do that if we film it, because then we can make sure it's all just done in 4 or 5 minutes. So we're going to look at 5 different stories, each one 4 or 5 minutes, no more. Each one brings out a slightly different expression of the strategy, I hope, if all's gone to plan. And in between each one, we'll just have 2 or 3 minutes, just where we're sat, reflecting on a couple of things, if that's okay. And then we'll see where we land and what time it is by the time we've done all of that. But the context is that ministry in a changing world, all of us, wherever we've come from across the UK, whether we've been in ministry for 5 years, 15 years, 40 years, 50 years. I was just reflecting with Richard as we arrived how many of us, and I don't fit into this category anymore, that's really sad, are under 40 as we gather. Can I just ask that question? Who's still under 40? It's not many of us. It's not many of us. Sadly, after 20 years in ministry, I am still one of the younger ministers. That really saddens me. Anyway, that's a whole other set of... I won't got time to go down that line. That's another conference in itself. So I'm going to show you the church that I'm currently pastor of. I should have introduced myself, shouldn't I? I didn't do that. I'll do it now. My name's Ashley Cooper. I'm the senior pastor at Swanbank Church in a place called Burslem. Who shouted that out? Great. Which is in Stoke-on-Trent. It's about an hour away from here. The heart of the Potteries. Burslem is the mother town of the Potteries. This video will tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. This is our story. My name's Ashley Cooper. I'm the senior pastor at Swanbank Church in Burslem, which is a church in the centre of Stoke-on-Trent, in the Potteries. The church has been here for a good long time, actually. The base of the church was here in 1801, so it's over 200 years old, and it's been rooted in the community of Burslem since then. It's obviously been through numerous transitions and changes, but currently it's a church that's active in its community. It's got over 420 members and continues to grow. Someone once asked me what the success of Swanbank was. I don't particularly like the word success, actually, if I'm honest. But it got me thinking about how we've grown and what's been the catalyst for that. And so I thought about it, and I think the answer is that our team is committed to our community. So we engage in all aspects of the community. A lot of my time spent outside the walls of the church. I'm on the board of the Burslem Regeneration Trust, so I'm engaged with business and community leaders. So I think I have a policy of being so committed and engaged within community that when any member of our community of Burslem has a need or a situation or needs some help or support, the first thing they think about is Swanbank. And so they turn to us at every point, whether that be spiritual or physical or emotional. The first place they turn is to us, and so we have a great relationship with our community. Swanbank's been through some transition over the last 10 years. If you go back to the 1980s, Swanbank was already a fairly large church, but it was a gathered church community in the city. One of the commitments for us over these last 10 years since I've been here as its leader is actually we're committed to our local community. So the growth over these last 10 years, and we've seen 100 members come into the life of the church over that period of time, I would think 90% of those people are from within a 1-mile radius of the church itself. So what we're seeing is our growth, not from gathered community across the city. There are other big churches in the city which folk engage with, and that's great. But our growth has been from local people in our community who want to kind of engage with who we are. The challenges, I guess, are common in many places. What we're trying to do here is transition a church that has history, 200 years of history, and therefore lots of baggage. So we're trying to transition something to be contemporary, to meet the present age, to engage with this community, and that's actually a real challenge, because there are some things I would let go tomorrow that members of my congregation want to hold on to and keep and think is really important. And so to wrestle through some of those things about why is this important, why do we carry on doing things, and we have to have an ownership of that together. And that's a compromise situation for many of us. And so we work together to try and work out who we are, what we need to carry with us, what we do new, and how we try and mix that all together. The future's really exciting, I think. We're just at the point of transitioning our team. The team is in constant flux, actually, which I think is really important. As the church changes and grows, so the team changes and grows. New staff are coming in, new staff are meeting different needs, so we suddenly have an 18 to 30s pastor, which we've never had before. That person's engaged in social media because social media is now an important part of who we are. So as we transition the church, so we're developing new team, and the future for me is exciting as this new team gets in operation, gets underway, and begins to see how the church can look forward together. Just one comment about our team. One of the seminars I'm sharing more about our story, very particular details of that. But one of the things I'm passionate about is that we build a team for the church that we want to be, not the church that we are. So if you only have a staff for where you are, there's never any growth room in that. You're always just working to capacity, doing what you've always done. So one of our principles is whenever we restructure or look at the team that we put in place, we always make sure the team is the team for where we want to be in 2 or 3 years' time and staffed for that, rather than staffing for where we actually are currently. That's a really important principle of when we look at our strategy moving forward. We create the space within the team to enable growth to happen. And too often what we do is we just build the team so we can function rather than create the space in it for growth to take place. Anyway, out of the video, the thing for us that comes out of that is about consistent community engagement. That actually for us, I picked up on, I was having a conversation with a friend walking from Methodist Church House to Euston when they asked the question, what's the success of Swan Bank? And I struggled to answer the question. But I think for me, it really is that anybody in our community, at any point, the minute they think about a need or a concern, the first thing that comes into their head is Swan Bank, and turn to us to enable them to kind of meet that. So just a question, where you are, 2 or 3 minutes. How rooted are you in your local community? How is the church perceived? Not how do you perceive it. How is the church perceived that you have involvement in, or those that you have involvement in? How are the churches perceived by the local community? Do you perceive them yourself? Just where you are, 2 or 3 minutes.
My first question would be, how do we know how we perceive? How do we get out there?
Yeah.
Talk to the local shop owner.
Yeah.
I go out.
I think I have a really good idea how we are perceived. I think I know how we're perceived.
I want to know how we find out. People talk about surveys, they don't work. It's out there talking to people, isn't it?
Yeah. 2 or 3 minutes, where you are, and then we'll just, yeah. If we could begin to pull that back. What we are, just a comment about the 5 videos, we're trying to take what are ordinary contexts, really. So stuff we can understand a little bit, rather than go to, there are other opportunities to talk about the pioneering work, and that'll happen over these few days, both in seminars, both on platform. But these are, all 5 are fairly ordinary Methodist contexts that are trying to do something to bring growth and maybe do new strategy. And the other thing to say, and I didn't say it in the video very clearly, I don't think, and we were just talking about it down here, within any of these, there's no quick fix solution for us, is there? If we wanted the quick fix, we'd have done it, maybe. But for this, for me, the consistent community engagement is years of work before you reach that point. And it's no overnight. You've got to commit to that for the long term. And sometimes our 5-year turnarounds don't help us. pause that. Any other comments? Oh dear, we are being recorded, that's not helpful. It always keeps you on your guard a little bit. Anyway, are there any comments? We've just got a couple of minutes from each one. Anything that came out of that you just wanted to share with everybody else? Just time for perhaps one or two that you were talking about in your group. Right down here. We're going to have to bring a mic to you because we are being recorded. So please stand. That'd be really helpful for the video. But literally...
Really encouraging here.
Sorry. Just 30 seconds, no more thanks.
Yeah, no, very briefly, I was just going to say that many ministers work in contexts where they've got a number of communities. And that makes what you're talking about even more difficult.
It does.
Especially when, certainly in our circuit, we have less members than you and your church.
Yeah.
You know, and many of them are of an elderly generation.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we've got to start looking at local ministry. And I know there are some conversations happening on a connectional level around what do we mean by local ministry and empowering local ministry with some credential. What does that look and feel like? And I know those conversations are happening, and we've got to engage that and fast. Because I think unless we start to really look at pastors in local congregations that really take some ownership, none of this can happen, and we're on a downward spiral. Anyway, perhaps one more. Towards the back.
We talked very briefly about the meaning of the word church. Might be a bit hackneyed, this idea, but is the church the people or is the church the building? So in asking how is our church perceived in the local community, we've said it's a building, it's a local resource, it's a source of income, etc., etc. Whereas actually I think what we want to talk about here, certainly what I want to talk about, is how the church is perceived, how the people are perceived, and how those people are interacting within the communities.
Great. OK, we'll look at a very different community. This is the Tongan Fellowship, meeting in High Wycombe. So this feels very different to Swanbank, so that's great. This is Zinga Vinipola. She'll be here with us tomorrow, doing some seminars and some work with us.
I am Zinga Vinipola. I come from Tonga, as you may see it, and I am now in High Wycombe circuit as a minister, and I looked after 4 churches, and part of my ministry is a chaplain to the Tongan community. Tongan Fellowship was driven by the needs that we as Tongans in a foreign country needed to make us feel belong, and of course we are in an environment that is so different to the Tongans, so we needed to come together quite regularly to make sense of who we are in a foreign country, and it built on our faith that wherever we go we look for a church. But you know, sometimes coming to an English church we may not make sense of it because of the difficulty of language and the barrier of the culture. The Tongan community are scattered community, and they are all over the place, and they come here because of what I'm doing here. And the project, we worship in our own language, but one of the project that we do is celebrating the Tongan National Day, and we're using a lot of social gathering to bring us together. And for me, it's and also to maintain our language, and that's the only way that we can get through to our children, the younger children. And for me, it's very important for them to know that they live in a foreign country, but to maintain their identity. One of the success is my being able to help the Tongan, facilitate them to share worship with this church. And we have done so in a bilingual language. We had Christmas together, we had Easter together, and also this coming Sunday, on the 25th of September, every September we have testimonial service that every time is called and stand up and witness to the love of God. And we're going to do that. Also, there will be 2 baptisms. So it's growing in a sense that bringing the Tongan together. I think the biggest challenge for this growing, this scattered community is trying to bring them together as a community, and also trying to make them feel that they are part of the host community here, and wherever they live they can be a witness. But it's trying to, for me, my first and foremost aim now is bring them together with the English community and make them know that they are part of the whole community. Well, I think the future is for the Tongan Fellowship is exciting, and I am very encouraging with how the Tongan Fellowship is developed and grow now, because wherever they are engaging in their local church, and to the point now that some of them are offering to do the local preaching course, and they are already start preaching in their church, as well as our children are taught and brought up in the church, and some of them can sing and do whatever they can to make the difference in the community where they live, and also to the community as a whole.
Church needs to be authentic in its relationships and nurturing of cultures and expressions. So, 2 questions. What's the role, because part of these 2 days is about looking at church and circuit, reimagining circuit. What's the role of circuit in nurturing diverse communities? And does the current circuit model work in this context? Discuss. And no is not just an effective response. No requires reason.
Continue now.
If we could pull the conversation back, that'd be really helpful. Maybe a couple of people just share where you were, the conversation you've just been having, thoughts right in the middle. If you could stand, that'd be really helpful. And take the mic, sorry. Take the microphone, that'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Question 2 presupposes there is one current circuit model, and I would challenge the fact that there is one circuit model.
Fair comment. Let's go to the gentleman towards the back, actually. Let's wait for the microphone, if that's okay.
I think my name is Irfan, belong to Cardiff Circuit, but like beside this circuit appointment, I'm working under the Synod. And as both of your questions says, like the role of circuit, I think if I'll say the role of Synod, because the Wales Synod is the first Synod in Wales. In 2007, they appointed me as a Synod enabler with culturally diverse congregations. And I have a big support from Cardiff Circuit as well. In Cardiff Circuit, since 2008, I started Urdu, Hindi and Punjabi fellowship, South Indian language, Malayalam fellowship in Methodist Church, Ethiopian fellowship in Methodist Church, because some other fellowship, the Tamil fellowship, and also in Swansea, other areas we started these fellowships. Because as the minister said, it's true. When the people, they come from the different cultures, different backgrounds, they feel comfortable in their own languages. I'm in this country since last 11 years, Methodist minister, but I feel more comfortable in Urdu, Hindi or Punjabi fellowship to understand theological matters. But I encourage those congregations, carry on with your fellowship, language fellowships, but don't forget to join the local churches. And use the word, we are not here by mistake, we are here by purpose. And mostly encourage the ethnic people, which I encourage them that, because majority of churches are empty, as you said before, we are the future of these churches. But our duty and responsibility is to bring them back the actual honor of these churches. But when I preach to the local community churches, beside this role, I'm working in 4 different directions: asylum seekers and refugees, working among the culturally diverse congregations, advocacy role across the synod. Mean like a bridge or pipe between the local community and culturally diverse people, how they meet each other, find a better community. But when I preach to the local community, I use the word, especially before start my sermon, I said, okay, how many of you know me? The majority people, there's just 4, 5, 3 people, they raise the hand, other people, they don't know me. When I visit different circuits, I said, okay, my answer is, what the UK missionaries did in my subcontinent, I'm the result of that work. But why this country need a missionary here? Like at the same, not here by mistake, but as a circuit, I think that I really appreciate the Wales Synod, who they appointed me, and a lot of ethnic work, and especially Cardiff circuit. We started at Trinity Centre. The church was closed. I opened that church, started for 7 days a week, working among the culturally diverse congregations.
Thank you. And you can carry on, hopefully, those conversations over dinner and things. Be really helpful. But I think one of the key issues I could have put on the opening slide is the changing face of our communities. One of some of the significant growth for us over the last 10 years has been with some very diverse peoples that are moving into our communities, which is great, but it changes how we do ministry, and I have to relearn some strategies to deal with that, because it alters how we communicate, it alters orders of worship, it alters our discipleship programs. Everything has to change as a result of, if we're going to nurture very diverse and different cultures within the local congregation, we have to change to do that. I haven't got time. I need to move on. Is it quick? Is it really quick? Make it quick and we'll go for it, since yours is the only hand.
I just
think a timer on.
One of the communities that we need to, diverse groups we need to think about is people with learning needs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's look at another story. This is the Burnley story with Phil Clark and Jemma.
I'm Phil Clark. I'm Superintendent Minister of the Methodist Circuit here in Burnley in East Lancashire, and been here 6 years. We have 9 churches around the town and around some of the rural parts nearby. The town is quite a tough place in some ways. There's been a lot of discouragements over the years. I think things are looking up a bit, but the churches reflect that as well. And here in the town centre, we're trying to develop church in a different way from what they've been accustomed to.
Hi, my name's Jemma Wraight. I'm the youth worker for the Burnley Methodist Circuit. I've been in Burnley for 5 years, and it's been really encouraging just to be part of a project that's trying to reach people that are not normally in church. So mainly I'm up on the Stoops estate working with children and young people and doing a lot of schools work as well.
We're trying to reach people who would not be reached by conventional ways of being church. We're trying to connect with some of the social need that's here, of which there is a lot. So in particular, we're doing things for people who are out of work and addicted in different ways.
Yeah, so up on Stoops, it's really an incarnational approach to ministry. So a lot of us live there and work there, and we just do relationships in life with the people who live there. So it's just great to see lots of people hearing about Jesus but living it out in community. So it's not necessarily church on a Sunday, but although that's starting to develop now, so we've been really encouraged to see that over the last year.
Well, I think the issue has been that over the years the church hasn't engaged with the local community, especially in the tough places, in the town centre and on the inner urban housing areas. We've tried to reconnect. We've found that conventional church, especially in the town centre, was really operating more in terms of how a suburban church might do. People came in to worship on Sunday morning, came to 1 or 2 Christian meetings and what have you, but actually didn't engage with the people who are around the town centre very much. Equally on the inner urban estates.
I think the key to success is relationships, really. And it's not about just trying to get people to sit on a Sunday morning or a Sunday afternoon in church. It's about trying to make disciples of Jesus Christ, and I think that's the only way you can really get success, is when you see people's life being changed and transformed. But it's also good to have a good team of volunteers and people who love Jesus and want to come alongside you to see His kingdom grow in Burnley, really. So yeah, I don't think there's any strategic model to it. I think it's just through the relationship and time and giving people the time in their lives, really. Yeah, I think the future is bright, really. As I said, it's about people starting to live their lives for Jesus, and I think the Christian community should be exciting. So when people look onto it, they should say, actually, that's something that I want to be involved in, really. So over the last year, we've planted a new church on Stoops, which has been really encouraging. It's called New Hope, and it's people that actually live in the community that are coming along to church on a Sunday and getting involved. And I think that's the future, really. It's for local people doing local church, rather than a lot of people having to come in all the time. But yeah, I think the future is positive.
One of the keys from when Jemma was talking was that actually a number of people moved physically into the community to live. And it's taken a few years, having moved, to begin to do the worshipping congregation. The relationships had to be built and developed and grow before church actually started. So the questions, just 2 questions. What are the possibilities in your circuit of identifying location and releasing pioneers to live in areas of key need? 1. What hinders this approach in our circuit? 2. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay, let's pull back again. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, Romans and countrymen, and anybody else we've missed out in the process. Okay, just a couple of people who may want to... There's one hand up over there on the side, and then we'll come down here, because I didn't come to you last time. Well, just do those 3 then, that's fine.
Kind of going to say what this guy's already said.
Okay.
But as a probationer, I've been given 4 churches, and I love my 4 churches. But we live in a manse in one of the communities, and that's where we're incarnational at the moment, and I cannot see a way that I can be incarnational in 4 communities. And so I'm feeling like I need to prioritise, and how can you do that when you've got 4 communities, and my kids are in one of the schools, and I'll be there picking up and dropping off, and I'm shopping in that butcher's, and I can be incarnational there. But how can I be incarnational and make those deep connections in 4 communities and encourage those in my congregations to do that in 4? It's kind of asking too much in one sense. How do we do that?
You're not expecting me to answer that question, are you? Well, answer simple one is, of course, from that video, Jemma was a layperson, not an ordained person. And the church has released Jemma and the family to move onto the Stoops estate and to be incarnational on the estate. How we invest our money may well answer some of those questions. Just before we kind of move on, in the district in which I'm stationed, which is the Chester and Stoke district, we just at the synod a few weeks ago committed ourselves to a journey, a church planting strategy that will end in 2 years, well, it won't end in 2 years' time, but it will mean in 2 years' time, across the district, hopefully, we've identified 4 locations. We're going to work with circuits. We're going to identify 4 locations. And the district, out of the Advance Fund, is going to release 4 pioneer ministers to work in those contexts. Paid for by the district, supported by the connectional... Ian will tell me the name of the grouping that they're going to be working alongside, Pioneer Pathway process. What's the mentoring program within that? Oh, the new one. Have I got that right? Is it the Pioneer Pathway? There you go. Well done. Sorry, Ian, to throw that on you, but you know more about it than I do. And so the district is saying, actually, we want to use the money that we have strategically. And we believe, actually, planting new congregations is just as important as putting our money into maintaining some of the ones that perhaps actually we shouldn't be maintaining. So we're going to prioritise that, and that will mean 100,000 a year out of the Advance Fund at least to enable that to happen. But that's about prioritising our finance. We cannot say the Methodist Church does not have money. How we use it is a big question. In our district, there's £4 million sat in circuit bank accounts. And I guess our district isn't any different to most districts around the connection. We cannot sit here and say we don't have asset and we don't have money. We've got to start deciding how we prioritise that, both at local church level, circuit level, and at district level. And I know there's at least one Shadow District in the room. Just smiling at her at the back. Hello, Lorraine. OK, there was a couple of comments. Sorry. Oh, I'm running out of time now. I've got to be done, so we need to be really quick. I can't go over time.
Alan Jefferson, North Cumbria Circuit. We've got an estate on the edge of Carlisle, which is quite a rough, run-down estate. And there is a deacon working in there, and she asked for some money from the circuit to buy a yurt. And the circuit had paid for this yurt. It's been planted in the middle of this this area, and now the deacon is working with the local community, bringing in things like mothers and babies, for children, for specific activities. She is not aiming at worship at this moment in time, but she's doing some research, of which the person who's assessing it is in front of me, so it strangely happens, into what the opinion is of the people of the church. And they don't seem to like the organised traditional church, but they are quite happy with some of the activities that the church is doing.
Great.
And they're quite happy to get involved in that. But we're waiting more of that research so that we can then find out what we're doing wrong in order to move forward.
Great. And Gareth, you've got 20 seconds. All right. It'll take us 20 seconds to get to you with the microphone. So then you haven't got any time left. And if you could stand up, that'd be really helpful. Thanks.
I was.
Sorry. Touché.
Very, very quickly. In the places where it works well, of course, we can do these things ecumenically.
Yeah.
That's all.
Absolutely. Let's go through. We've got less than 20 minutes left, so we need to go quite fast. The West End Methodist Church. Now, Nicola Jones is sat at the back. Nicola Jones was minister at the West End for 4 years, well, in the circuit for 4 years, and saw this project through, was lifted by conference to fly somewhere else. So the Reverend Jeff Short, who's now looking after the West End project. But if you want to know any more about this story, Nicola has all the information, and we're with you over the next 2 days. The West End story. Now, this is about buildings.
I'm Jeff Short. I'm the Superintendent Minister of the Stoke South Methodist Circuit, and I'm Minister at the West End Church and Community Cafe. Yeah, the project is really exciting. We took two fairly traditional smaller churches, brought them together, and then looked for a halfway property that they could make into their centre. And the thing we came up with was a pub. One of the things that the West End project did to engage with the community, I think, was take a building that they were all familiar with in the centre of their community and let the people watch it develop. So if you like, I think a lot of people have got a basic inquisitiveness, stroke nosiness, what's going on? So we kept throwing the doors open and said, well, this room's done now, that room's done now. And so people started to feel, hey, this is ours. I mean, they'd been in it as a pub, they'd been in it as a restaurant, and now we're saying, come into it as a church, come into it as a cafe, just come and be with us. I think one of the successes that the West End has achieved is actually getting the backing of people to fund it. It's one thing to say, we've got a brilliant idea, we've got a feeling God's in this, but when people say, so do we, and we'll put a considerable amount of money into it so that you get something like £900,000 to develop it and then £450,000 to staff it, then you figure we're doing something right. And I think the success there is that people believe in us, and then that causes the people who make up the church to believe in it as well. I think the biggest challenge that the West End has faced over the time that it's taken to develop it, which has been probably the best part of 4 years, was keeping people keen and keeping them believing it's going to happen. We've sat in this room when it's been derelict, when there's been wires hanging plaster off the wall, and telling people this is going to be a state-of-the-art centre, this is going to be a place you can be so proud of, this is going to be a place you can bring your friends to, and they're looking and thinking, yeah, right. But the people stayed with the vision. I've got to say there's times when I thought, is it? But we did. We kept the people. Nobody sort of left when the churches came together and we were meeting in another building, and people kept believing something wonderful was going to happen, and then kept working and then kept involving the friends. But it's a challenge to do that. The future for the West End project is really exciting. We've secured funding for 4 posts for 5 years, and that means that we can employ a centre manager who will have a development role. We've got an outreach worker who will engage with the local community, bring groups in, take services out. We'll be able to employ a chef, which means the cafe part will be open 5 or 6 days a week. And we've got a caretaker stroke cleaner who will be there to make sure that the doors are always open, the seats are always out. And so we've built the church, the bricks and mortar, and now we're all geared up to build the church with people.
So, a couple of questions. One of the early conversations we used to have when I was teaching or involved in the Mission Shaped Ministry course early on in the early days was to talk about third space, those community spaces that are owned by community and where the church often is not present. So a couple of questions. One, should the church move out of current buildings and move into third space? Basically, what they've done in Stoke is to close 2 buildings and identify the third space and become church in it. That's what they've done. In your context, what's the key third space in your community? What's the key space that the community engages in? And how engaged is the church in that space currently? A couple of questions. Okay, if we could pull that back. I'm really conscious you won't get to a lot of depth with those questions and conversations. The aim of this session was to spark some things that go on over further conversation through the next 2 days. That was the aim. And all the videos will be downloadable to you free of charge. If any one of them helps you in your context, you can have the videos will be there. I think they'll be on the Reimagine site, available to you to download and use. So they're there as a tool if they're helpful to you. We've got one more to do. Are you still awake?
Can I just ask, would
the
questions be with the videos?
They weren't going to be, but I can put those with them if you want. That was just, I was trying to pull out from each one. Anyway, that's by the way. Okay, this is Littleover. We're not far from Littleover. And this is Littleover Methodist Church.
So I'm Gareth Higgs, I'm the senior leader of Littleover Methodist Church in Derby. So Littleover as a place is quite an aspirational, well-to-do area, and as a church we would kind of define ourselves, I guess, as a kind of charismatic evangelical church. We're seeking to grow, we're being very mission-minded, and we've got a passion really to reach our community with the good news of Jesus, and that hopefully will come by people here living like Jesus, bringing his hope and love to this community. We've got a great suite of premises here, and for a long time really we've kind of used our building as a community hub. So we've got lots of services that are based here that people then come into the place to reach and access. We've got a community cafe which is run here, and that's run by a church employee and church volunteers, just making connections with people on a very low level basis. We've got a reception desk here so that anybody who comes into the building gets a really good warm welcome and first impressions are good. We've got a youth programme that is running and active from 0 to up to 18, and that's both in terms of discipleship and in terms of outreach to young people. So on the whole, a lot of our stuff actually is attractional. It's kind of doing good stuff here on our premises and engaging people in that alpha, mums and tots, all the usual stuff, but just trying to do that well to a high standard so that people trust us, build a relationship with us, and through that relationship come to see something different in our lives. Biggest key for us has been about getting welcome right, and I guess engaging particularly with young families. So for us, yeah, we've had an attractional model, as I said, but often when people came here, we'd have a lot of kind of in words, in language, and the building wasn't very accessible. So we put a lot of effort into doing simple things, making sure toilets are really well signposted, making sure when we dismiss the kids on a Sunday morning to their kids' work, that there's people pointing people in the right direction, making sure that you know, we're using accessible tools to help people access worship, making sure we use language that people understand. So welcome, inclusion on a very simple level. Again, just doing simple things really well has been key for us. And the other thing is about having a deliberate focus on children and young families. We know that 40% of the population of this borough are in nuclear families, and so we're trying to provide entry points for them at different stages, Messy Church, TOTS, all that stuff, to help people access Christian faith. Biggest challenge for us has been working with the Methodist system. Constantly resources are pulled away from our resource here, which means we cannot be as effective as I think we could be, or we certainly want to be. And we have a passion to kind of maybe even plant out from here, or kind of extend the reach of our work, or invest in more ministry here. And actually constantly, it's a battle with this kind of circuit infrastructure, which is just a completely different culture, to get them to understand that those things might even be possible. We're excited about what God has for us. We have a vision to see the church grow here and to see more people come to faith in Jesus Christ. My heart would be that as the church is built up here and strengthened in maturity, equipped for ministry, sent out in mission, we then either are planting new places which embody the kingdom culture, or actually perhaps we are an instrument of renewal, maybe replanting another Methodist church or other churches that have kind of come towards their last legs. We're excited about all the possibilities. It's whether the church as an institution has got the same vision and aspiration that we have.
The comment that came from Gareth for me was, we do what we do and we try to do it really well, to a high quality. Our buildings and our welcome, we do really well. I'm not going to break us into conversation because we've not got a lot of time, but you know what your buildings look like, feel like, and how we can invest in those. Do our buildings talk of life and future? Do our activities communicate a God who is relevant, or a jumble sale God that you can take or leave? I just want to end with one comment about work that we're engaged in at Swanbank and the Burslem Mission Circuit, of which I'm a part currently. We are intentionally now engaging beyond our walls as a circuit to look at the whole new church planting and reseeding of churches around our area. And we're doing that in a number of different ways with a number of different models. So there are two fairly large churches in our circuit, Swanbank, of which I'm a part and senior pastor of, and the Potters Church, which was a plant out of Swanbank 23 years ago now, and is also a church around 400, 450 strong on a Sunday morning about 2 miles away from our building. So two fairly strong, large Methodist premises working. The Potters Church, 4 weeks ago, took 100 of its members and planted within Longton Central Hall. Longton Central Hall is a barn of a building in the centre of Longton, another part of our city, with a very dwindling congregation. And the future for Longton, without some kind of change and radical change, looked bleak. So we're at the very start of what's been a turbulent journey to get to this point, to look at how two churches can work together to invest for the future. And we've taken 100 people out of one premises and planted them into another. I've still left 300 at Birch's Head, the Potters base, and 100 in to begin to reseed one of our main central halls. It'll be an interesting journey to watch over these coming months and years. It's not been an easy one. There's been a lot of conflict in that journey to get to that point, a lot of heartache and pain, but I think on both sides there's a compromise and a desire to reseed within one of our communities. The other is at Swanbank, where I am. One of the circuits that neighbours us is a circuit of 8 churches, one minister for the 8 churches, so just one superintendent minister, who left 12 months ago and was not replaced by the system. So a circuit without a minister at all, because nobody wanted to go to the particular circuit. To be honest, I don't blame them. It's awful. There should have been some strategic conversations had many, many years ago, but didn't happen. So the chair of the district is now the titular superintendent and all of that. Marvellous. But we've been asked if we would take on 2 churches in that circuit. There are 2 churches in that circuit that look like they have real potential. for life and growth. And so at Swanbank, we now invest the leadership. And so I'm now overseeing 2 other churches as well, with a team of people from Swanbank who are looking at worship and leadership and strategy. So we're not planting 50 or 100 people in. We're taking 2 or 3 core people to work with, because one of them has 80 members and the other has 25 members. We're working with the local church to try and offer new idea and resource and energy to turn them both around. Both have seen significant growth and change in the last 12 months. Again, very, very difficult journeys, but 2 very different models. One where we've planted 100 people out and in, and the other where we've said, let's take 2 or 3 core leaders, preachers, worship people, and invest in a church to work alongside and to bring about transition. That's a slower journey in terms of transition and change. But they're very different models, and we're just seeing how they work out. So some of that story will come out over the connection, I guess, over the next few years as both of those work out across the connection. So they were 5 stories. They were intentionally fairly traditional Methodist models, inherited church model. That was intentional. So that you can take some of those ideas and thought process and let them then linger with you as you go to sleep, and see what sparks for you. Because I guess many of us are working in the inherited church model. So that was the reason for doing that. So they're 5 stories. You can take them. I hope some of that has been helpful as we begin to reimagine mission-shaped churches and circuits. I'll stop there. Thanks, Richard.